Assalamualaikum and greeting all viewers. Our video will demonstrate the evaluation process of 5 types of health hazard by following industry, which are: first, iron and steel making plant; second, palm oil plantation; third, road construction; and lastly, healthcare and hospital personnel.
Hi, I am Ahmed Iqbal Beramdi. Today, I would like to discuss about the activity at iron and steel making plant and the significant hazard on every activity. First activity is coke oven. The most significant hazard is lifting raw material. It may potential musculoskeletal injuries. Second activity is iron and steel making process. The most significant hazard is high work pressure. It may impact the well-being and social support of employees. Third activity is scuffing process for surface preparation. There are two significant hazards where the first hazard is exposed to noise. It may potential short and long-term hearing sensory loss. Second hazard is exposed to metal fume. It may potential to lung damage and lung cancer for long term. Last activity is coating lines. The significant hazard is exposure to pathogens such as Legionella. It can cause fever, chills, headache, and muscle aches. Thank you.
My name is Muhammad Hafiz and I'm Ismail, and I'm going to bring you to the hazard that came from the oil palm plantation. As you can see, I am the agricultural sector, which is the collection of the oil palm fruit, more of precisely of palm oil plantation. Work in the sector often involve with the work and activity to farm itself. Among the activity, I can list that are: first, plantation investing activity; and second, revenue and delivery activity; and third, weed poisoning and removing; and fourth, management of worker; and lastly, crop of management activities. This activity is able to provide the possible danger to employer, like first, exposure excessive noise for vehicle that return short or long-term hearing sensory loss. Second is exposed to chemical substance fume with potential headache, skin rash, eye irritation, and skin cancer. And third is exposed to excessive handling and potential to sustain body injury and musculoskeletal disorder syndrome. And fourth is exposed to the venom, prey animal potential can get disease and may cause death. And five is mental stress and from management activity. We had list of the existing hazard of the use as data to conduct research to risk assessment, because this existing hazard do not have existing risk control measure. That's it.
Hi, I am Amrul bin Khalid. Today I would like to discuss the activity at road construction and the significant hazard on every activity. First activity is land clearing. The most significant hazard is venom animal, which is snake. It may cause potential to get disease. Second activity is the mechanical excavation. The most significant hazard is the excessive noise of machinery, where can cause hearing loss. Third activity is site access. The most significant hazard is lifting heavy equipment and machinery. It may cause musculoskeletal disorder syndrome. Fourth activity is a preparation cost activity. The most significant hazard is asphalt fume, which cause eye irritation and skin cancer. Last activity is a management of the worker. The significant hazard is stress of the worker, where can lead the psychological or physical harm.
my name is Lukman bin Nurul Jamil. Okay, for my part, I will explain about the healthcare and hospital personnel. So, I will explain about the 5 hazards that always occur in the hospital. First hazard, hospital and clinical waste collection from the wards and clinic. Okay, so the most significant, the hazard is spillage of chemicals such as the medicine. It may occur inhalation and direct contact. And the second is hazard is waste movement to the storage area. So the significant is always unnatural the movement stuff because lack of the race. Okay, it may affect to the result in the musculoskeletal disorder and the may bodily injury. The third is plant monitoring during the process or incineration. The significant is exposed to the smoke and the contact and the inhalation of the dust and the body injury of the could cause infection to the lung disease. The next hazard is lifting and the moving equipment in the hospital area. The significant is impact the body by the occur injury that could lead to musculoskeletal disease. And the last is fan the system, compressed system incineration. Plan and the most significant is the noise vibration could lead to the reduction in hearing capacity. Okay.
Okay guys, for this assessment, why not we make a discussion?
Okay guys, thank you for our session meeting. And now we will discuss about the part of hazard assessment. I'm start for my part that I control the hazard. First section is about the noise assessment. Okay, the step of assessment process the noise. First, review the available information. Okay, review the available information. We should to collect the review relevant workplace data or previous accident occurs. And second is baseline survey. You know baseline survey, Amir?
Yes.
Okay, it should the primary assessment by the inspection. Third is output from the survey. Okay, the output from the output survey is report and noise control. And the lastly is review the follow up the check and such as the review improvement by the situation. So we get the procedure and the evaluating the health hazard. First, we should include the result of noise exposure measurement under which the risk occur. Second, comparing the personal monitoring by the refer to occupational safety and health in the regulation 2016. Okay, third is how the consider alternative the procedure equipment or working method which the would process noise or control. And the lastly is the finding risk the assessment show the recorded. Okay, there are 3 types of or 3 equipment that using to control the noise hazard. Amri, did you know the control hazard or apparatus that we use?
Dosimeter.
Yes, you are right. First, we should to use the sound level meter. Second, as Amri said, noise dosimeter, and the last is sound level calibrator. Okay guys, let's to the next assessment for the hazard. Okay, we continue the high temperature assessment for the hospital. So the step assessment process is first visual the assessment area, identify the situation and analysis the data the suitable for the area. Second is measuring the environment with suitable equipment, measure the temperature as well as observation effect to employee. The third is safe work practice that psychological measurement by the temperature. So we go to the procedure or evaluating the health hazard for the temperature. First, we need to take the initial reading from each device, complete the reading from the thermometer for the theoretical value for the temperature. Second is start the water heating to turning the hot plate on the maximum setting. And the last is record the data from the device by thermometer data. So we have also 3 equipment or apparatus. First, we have measure by the thermometer. Second is probes, and the last is non-contact. That is to measure the temperature, high temperature in this situation hazard. Okay.
Okay, Amir. The step for assessment process for hazard in chemical substances. First is identify information, which identify hazard data found to be either existing or scale impact. Second is hazardous ingredient, by taking into account the material contained in the activity performed. Third is physical or chemical characteristic, where identify the hazardous substances are capable of resulting in hazard other than concentration on chemical hazard. 4 is fire and explosion hazard data, where it to identify reactive effects that are harmful to the environment. 5 is data reactivity, where is to collect material and impact data. And lastly, health hazard data, which to conduct a network of health hazard process. Based on the hazard which is fuel that happen in this for industry, we must conduct CHRA method. First is designing the assessor, where the appointed assessor must be given the authority to do work, have enough resources to gather information, consult the appropriate people, review existing record and examine the workplace. Second is gather information about chemical and work practice. The purpose of this step is to identify all chemical hazards and to gather information about the work practice. Third is divide into work unit. This step is an inspection of the work area where chemicals are used into the working environment. During this inspection, identify how and where chemical hazards are used and who and how they expose. 4 is determine degree of hazard. This step to identify degree of all the chemical hazards to help while working. 5th is evaluate exposure. The purpose of this step to assess the exposure of the work unit to each of the chemical hazards to help use and at the same time assess the adequacy of the existing control measure. C is assess the adequacy of control measure. This assessment is to be conducted simultaneously with the exposure assessment where assessed by inspecting the existing control measure. 7 is conclude the assessment. This will be useful in determining whether action to control risk need to be identified. It also will be evaluate whether significant or not significant of the hazard. 8 is identify action to be taken, where to identify possible action to be taken, including the suggestion further precaution and control measure based on the conclusion. 9 is reporting the assessment, where this step is record all the information that have been collected. Recording of the assessment is important because it will be useful for the purpose of follow-up action with review and compliance with legal requirement. The assessor must present this assessment report to the employer. Lastly is review assessment. The assessment need to be reviewed from the time to time or every 5 years, or they have been significant change or directed by the Director General, Deputy DG or the Director of OSH.
Okay guys, now we will discuss about the part of the hazard assessment process. I'm starting for my section about my biological assessment. So the start of the assessment process in this case, first is the inventory of biology agent, handled by the laboratory staff. The purpose of the research and analysis. Second is the analysis specimen. Analysis the specimen that cause the hazard, the occur, the measure of the level of possible risk. And thirdly, physical and chemical hazard. The analysis harmful agent capable to causing harm, biology hazard. So we can go the procedure of the evaluating of the hazard. First is identify the hazard and the risk, and it is determined by most common routes of transition. And second is hazard of characteristic. The evaluation process, the potential consequence of each adverse effect. And third is the risk characteristic. The evaluation process identify the potential adverse of the effect. Next, the risk characteristic identify the characteristic, the hazard, and next the management strategy. This application for management strategy to reduce the potential identified. This. And lastly is the determination of the operating risk that result of the risk assessment. There are 3 equipment or apparatus that used in the control biological. And first, basically we know crack centrifuge, tube, improperly maintenance, autoclave, and lastly overfill, sharing, containers, and Bunsen burner. So for the next assessment of the hazard is we continue to the ergonomic assessment. with the step assessment process of the case. First is establish common economic assessment. That method is work place. Second is conduct objective portion and the assessment compared to the task prioritized to make improvement. And third is assessment the data that team collected. The injury risk, the job personal risk, lastly create the plan to moving forward. Choose the best solution and create the improvement plan moving forward. So we can go to procedure on evaluating the hazard. First, review the national economic and adequacy of the existing control measure, that including the economic risk factor assessment. The result, we obtain the summary of finding the advanced ERA report. And the second is gather the additional information. Third, obtain the further information. Assess economic risk level of assess the evaluation configuration. There's two elements. First is economic risk assessment, then award configuration action assessment. Next is the summarize the finding that to determine the appropriate control measure. Lastly is priority of the economic improvement using setting table that dedicated level of the action to taken. Okay, yeah, is that for the my part? We go to the my partner. Okay, go next.
We continue. Okay, I will explain the evaluation process of psychosocial factor. There are 5 steps to evaluate the hazard. First, establish appropriate risk measure and exposure variable where the questionnaires representing the occupational stress. Second, estimating risk factor level. Third, overview of method where provide evidence of the research available relating to the health impact of psychosocial risk at the workplace. Fourth, criteria for identifying relevant where it explains the assessment impact either directly or indirectly. Fifth is research where this step carry out using a mixed search strategy which is online database and manual research. Okay guys, now I will discuss about the procedure to evaluate the psychosocial factor. First, identify hazard and those at risk. It involves understanding how the work is done and how harm could be caused. Second, evaluate and prioritize risk. This can be done either through questionnaires and interview. Third, decide on preventive action. To decide on which action to take, organization may conduct focus group with a sample of workers or require line manager to discuss best solution. Fourth, take action. Preventive and protective measure should be preferred to reactive and individual measure treating stress symptom. Fifth, monitor and review. The measure taken to prevent or reduce stress should be monitored and evaluate any action taken to establish what works best. When a significant change occurs, the management should be assess the effectiveness of all solutions put in place to counter stress because new hazard may emerge. Okay, that's all. That's all for our discussion. Overall, the risk of health hazard can be reduced if all parties work together to implement the control measure that have been proposed. Thank you for watching this video.